Winston Churchill once said, "History is written by the victors." Today, we are going to study about such a story, the history of Vaikam Satyagraha, which is the rendering of the victory of the downtrodden. It was the first manifestation which took place in Kerala, demanding equal rights for every individual in the society. It was a revolt against the irrational taboos upon the caste system, the pomposity of the privileged classes, the practice of untouchability, and the practice of unapproachability. Many taboos were associated to the lower castes. They were regarded as unclean and their proximity was treated as toxic. They were labeled as untouchables and were constantly reminded to keep a distance from the upper classes, or in other words, the mainstream. All these unjustifiable practices made their life miserable, and this led to the Vaikam Satyagraha. The Vaikam Satyagraha took place at the Shiva temple situated near Kottayam in Kerala. The movement began on March 30th, 1924 and lasted for 24 months. The Shiva temple was famous for its many qualities and at the same time was a center of orthodoxy. What made it the center of the orthodoxy was that the Avarnas were not only denied access to the temple but also to the roads around the temple. Notice boards were placed at all places proclaiming the prohibition. This practice were unquestioned because people were not aware of the fact that they were being denied basic human rights. It all started with a few notable incidents, and now let's look into that. Two people were prohibited from walking down the road. The first person who endured this experience was Ayankali. He was not allowed to proceed any further from a particular point while allowing his bullock cart to proceed. This incident highlighted the value placed by the upper classes on the lower classes. The next person to face such a denial was none other than Srinarayana Guru. Another major incident that triggered the situation was the rejection of the royal injunction by the upper class and the High Court. A notification was passed by the government of Travancore in 1865. In it, it was stated that all roads were open to the people despite of their caste. This order was twisted and interpreted by the upper class and the High Court in such a way that it suited their desires. They claimed the rule was only applicable to the Rajavidis, since the Vaikam temple and the roads nearby were Gramavidis. The ban on the entry of the lower classes remained the same, they said, and likewise it went ahead. After these incidents, a few people started to take measures to put an end to this practice. Now let's look into who was the first person or who started it as such. The first move towards eliminating this injustice started in 1905. The representatives of the Irava community, namely Kochugunyan Chanar and Kumaranashan, sought to have a legal solution to this problem from the Travancore legislature. But this attempt was not materialized. Even though it did not get the result it hoped for, it definitely triggered the chain of events that changed the course of life in Kerala. Next, we are going to see the contributions of the most prominent figure in Vaikam Satyagraha. It was that of T.K. Madhavan. He was a radicalist. That is, he believed in the need for a change in society and believed that only a revolution could bring in the change. He followed concrete methods to achieve his reformation. He weighed his opportunities, chose his allies, and analyzed the means through which he would attain the goal. His ways were methodical. He first expressed his rage, disappointment, and observations in the SNDP yoga. Afterwards, he drew the attention of the Congress party. The next thing he did was to arrange a meeting with Gandhiji. It was materialized on the 23rd September 1921. It was a fruitful endeavor, and he succeeded in convincing Gandhiji the urgency of the situation. Af- After succeeding in gaining the support of Gandhiji, many more members and groups came forward to support the mission. We can see that in the 1923 Kakinad Congress meet, a report was presented by T.K. Madhavan, Sardar Panikkar, and K.P. Keshava Menon. It cited the discrimination endured by the lower caste people. As a result, an Untouchability Abolition Committee (UAC) was formed. The members of UAC were T.K. Madhavan, Kurur Nilakandan Namboothiri, T.R. Krishnaswamy Iyer, K. Velayuda Menon, and K. Kelappan. The turn of the events began with Kerala Paryadanam. The Untouchability Abolition Committee and KPCC decided to organize a procession of the Avarnas along the Temple Road in 1924. The circumstances was really unfavorable, so they had to change their tactics. Instead of organizing a massive protest, they decided to split into groups of three and start showing their displeasure in this practice. The first three people to walk down the road were Kunyapi, Bahulayan, and Govinda Panikar. As they walked down the road, they were stopped and inquired about their caste, and when they did not reveal their caste, they were prevented, resisted, and later arrested. For 2 more days, the protesting continued as such, but it stopped at the promise of a negotiation. But on the seventh day, seeing nothing coming out of the negotiations, the leaders Keshav Menon and T.K. Madhavan took the lead. But it only resulted in their arrest. Their arrest did not weaken the satyagraha. In fact, it only ignited the spirit of the satyagrahis. As the hardships they had to face started to become stronger than ever, it was quite clear that the task taken up by the satyagrahis was pretty huge. They were being given a lot of support from many people and many groups around India. The most important person who extended the support to the satyagraha was Srinarayana Guru. He paid a visit, and his presence elevated the movement as such. The moral dimension of the movement was brought into focus by his presence. It was made clear that the attempt was no longer to just gain access to the roads and temples, but the intention was the eradication of this social evil from its very roots. More and more people came into support for this protest. They were the Akalis from Punjab, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, also known as Periyar, and his wife Nagamma, and a whole group of people that came along with them, and the Sikh community. The Akalis extended their support. The Sikh community offered to meet the expenses of the satyagraha. Periyar was arrested twice during the satyagraha, but none of these things caused any hindrance for the progression of the satyagraha. Along with the support of these many people, there came the support of Savarna community. It was a gesture of solidarity and a symbol of how everyone was suffocated by the practice. A huge procession was carried out by the Savarnas under the leadership of Manath Padmanabhan. It started with a gathering of 500 people, and by the time it reached Trivandrum, it transformed into a mammoth rally. Another procession under the leadership of Perumal Naidu from Suchindram also joined this rally. At the end, they submitted a memorandum by a delegation of Savarnas headed by Changanasheri Parameswaran Pillai to the Maharani. The Maharani suggested that the matter should be settled at the legislature, and a resolution was moved in the legislature by K. Kumaran on 7th February 1925. Unfortunately, it was defeated by 22 votes against 21. This result actually reduced the morale in the satyagrahis, and they were frustrated and unnerved. This deliberateness of the Satyagrahis were taken for the merit by the opponents. They resolved to put an end to this movement, and to attain their objective, they unleashed a series of violence and atrocities upon the Satyagrahis. This violence brought Gandhiji to the site at Vaikam. He attempted to negotiate but failed. As a last resort, he wrote a letter to W. H. Pitt asking to end the brutality upon the Satyagrahis. He then persuaded the government to withdraw the prohibitory orders, and successfully on the 23rd of November, the government proclaimed that the roads on the three sides of the temples would be open to the public, while the eastern entrance was reserved for the Savarnas alone. Thus, the Satyagraha was withdrawn because they succeeded in gaining what they initially started for. It was only by 1928 the backward castes got the right to walk on every public road leading to all temples in Travancore. If we look back, the initial process to get this right started in 1905. The time duration is an implication to the depth of the caste hierarchy that was existing in the society. The Vaikam Satyagraha was the first organized movement. It manifested, or it showcased, what an organized process can beget. It was inspirational for many people, and it resulted in the rise of many leaders who came up and spoke about much more atrocities that was prevalent in the society. Thus, it is only right to say that Vaikam Satyagraha was the first of its kind and marked the beginning of a new dawn. It resulted in making Kerala a much more secular state. Thank you.